The topic of tonight, what made Benjamin Franklin's brain so different? I could talk about Benjamin Franklin for 2 days straight. He's my favorite Philadelphian. I was asked tonight to keep this to 10 minutes. That is so agonizing for me, but I'm going to do my best. Let's get down to this guy, my man, Mr. Benjamin Franklin. Again, 2 days straight, I could talk so much about this guy, but in particular tonight, we're going to be talking about... starting with this, which by the way, this happens to be on the front cover of this. If after this anybody wants to see a completely mirrored book that Amazon at this point is not permitting to be published because they told me, quote unquote, all your pages are upside down. They need to be reformatted. I was like, that's totally not what this is about. The first couple pages, it mentions what it's all about, and then you flip open to the back and you read it all. It's all in mirrored direction. Franklin, by the age of 12, he was in his brother James's printing shop after only going to elementary school for 2 years. Dropped out, goes to work with his brother James. He spends the next 30 years as a printer, particularly a colonial printing composer, which he claimed being better than average at. And because of manual transfer learning, that'll make sense, and I'll explain further that here in just a moment. So Franklin, he's looking at the uppercase and the lowercase, and all day long he's looking at this kind of jibber jabber. And you guys ever see this over at the Ben Franklin Museum? I also work part-time at the Ben Franklin Museum. We have this down there in the exhibit, and I love it. Fish and visitors stink after 3 days. Old boys have their playthings as well as young ones. The difference is only in the price. And then over here on the left, the noblest question in the world is, what good may I do in it? And then down here, 3 may keep a secret if 2 of them are dead. Super cool, Mr. Benjamin Franklin. And so he's reading like this for basically 30 years during the day, and then he's going home at night, and he's reading books in the traditional direction. And if you probably know, he was a bibliophile. He hated going to church on Sundays because it got in the way of him and his study times. So, however many hours a day from the age of 12, he's reading in mirror direction, and then he's reading in traditional direction. Wow, okay. Well, whatever. What can that do to the brain? A whole bunch of this. Right here, benefits of mirror reading include, and I'll just read it out here, activation of both brain hemispheres, structural improvement of glial cells inside the corpus callosum, which is the muscle in the middle of the brain that connects the 2 hemispheres. It's the communication bridge between the hemispheres. Einstein's was shown to have, it was more symmetric. His brain, his corpus callosum was thicker. His brain actually weighed less than the average human brain. The average adult human brain is 3 pounds. Einstein's was 2.7. His anterior parietal lobe was like 15% bigger though. And you can learn more about that, of course, at our own Mutter Museum here in Philly. It's the only place in the world that has his brain on public display. Gray matter growth in the right hemisphere. In the left hemisphere, in about less than 90%, between 80 and 90% of humanity, there's an area called Broca's area that was discovered by a French neurologist in the 1860s, and Paul Broca, and it's in that hemisphere. But you grow neurons and synapses more in this hemisphere when you're doing that mirror reading and general mirror movement. Improvement of working memory and mental rotation skills. Working memory. Benjamin Franklin, if his memory was better, he was able to recall more details and basically increase polymathic tendency. One of such people, Mr. Leonardo da Vinci. And no, this is not backwards. I wrote it like that because right up there in the upper right-hand corner, that's also how he wrote in his personal notebooks. Left-handed mirrored, but he also wrote right-handed traditional. He's been doing that. He was doing that since before the age of 21, before he had died in his 60s. We have more than 7,200 personal pages of Da Vinci's notebooks left, which is only a fraction of what was originally written. He wrote so much, but also his brain would have been abnormally symmetric. Another guy in the very middle of my book as you're passing it around. Anyone know the name of that man who's on the cover of the book? Right in the very center. Baden-Powell. Yep, Lord Robert Baden-Powell. Anyone ever in the Boy Scouts? Anyone know?
Girl Scouts.
And Girl Scouts, yes, his sister. Yep, the Powells. So,
Out by LA.
and say it again?
Mount Baden-Powell near LA.
Oh, Mount Baden-Powell near LA, that's right. And so Baden-Powell, the official Boy Scout handshake is simply a left-handed handshake. He was a huge practitioner of this. 3 years before the Boy Scouts started, he wrote the introduction to a book called Ambidexterity. And in the introduction, he actually writes it both left and right-handed. Not in mirror direction, but in traditional direction. So nonetheless, and also with Boy Scouts, talking about polymathic tendency, for anyone who's ever been in Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts, merit badges. All these different, the very first merit badges to come out were 57. And they range from sculpture to architecture to hunting to astronomy to everything. Polymathic tendency. I will not be reading all of this, but again, Franklin for 30 years, colonial printing composer, reading a whole lot of mirror direction. And then in 1779, 30 years after his school that he started became recognized as the University of Pennsylvania, oldest university in America, he writes this essay. He addresses this essay to educators. In this essay, he creatively writes from the feminine voice of the left hand. The essay is called A Petition of the Left Hand. I'll read just the beginning of it here. To those who have the superintendency of education, to educators, I address myself to all the friends of youth and conjure them to direct their compassionate regards towards my unhappy fate in order to remove the prejudices of which I am the victim. What is that all about? Well, there's some prejudices in which the left hand is not being treated as equal as his sister here. Her sister here. There are twin sisters of us, and the two eyes of man do not more resemble, nor are capable of being upon better terms with each other than my sister and myself. Were it not for the partiality of my parents, of our parents, who make the most injurious distinction between us. You can read more on this, but he's saying that, yeah, the parents are, this is really bad that they don't exercise us both equally. Franklin will tell you all about why here in this letter. 11 years later, he dies, but it was a couple of years, it was 4 years, I think, after he wrote this, that Mr. Thomas Jefferson decided to go over to France. And Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin, they had a very, I want to say intimate relationship in a way. And of course, we're all tour guides here. There's probably a lot of us who can share even more on this. But Thomas Jefferson, by the time he was, 33, he was writing the first draft of the Declaration of Independence. Benjamin Franklin was one of 4 other guys who were part of that editing process. And Franklin takes the document and he makes, I think, the very first correction where Thomas wrote, we hold these truths to be self-evident, or excuse me, we hold these truths to be sacred. See what I did? We hold these truths to be sacred. Benjamin Franklin was like, nope. The non-churchgoer he was like, nope, self-evidence. So started off there, and years later, Jefferson replaces Franklin as the ambassador to France. That letter Franklin wrote while he was in France, comes over, and they spend the next year together before Franklin ultimately comes back here to Philly. When Franklin comes back, Jefferson is still over there as our second ambassador to France, and he's frolicking through a field one day with this chick, Maria Causeway, who's apparently really into, tries impressing her by jumping over a fence, falls down, breaks his right hand. He was a native right-hander, so he had to write left-handed for rehabilitation purposes. If you look at the National Park website, nps.gov, this is taken right from there, it says right here, Jefferson taught himself to write with his left hand and remained ambidextrous for the rest of his life. Interesting. Even more than just after rehabilitation. So what I'm proposing happened was Jefferson came back here and he actually spent time at Franklin's home, which is today where the Franklin Museum is. And they got together again, I think just 3 months before he had died. So I think it was January of 1790 that Jefferson was here. And so they're catching up. And I can only guarantee that Jefferson was like, yeah, I was over France, and Maria and I frogging on the field, broke my right hand. So I had to learn how to write left-handed. I'm guessing, unless Franklin showed him this while they were still in France, it's possible. Franklin did a lot of writings, who knows? They were doing a lot of business over there, but he might have shown him. But what would have for sure happened was, dude, no way. I wrote an essay about that a few years ago. You should continue doing that for the rest of your life. NPS says he practiced it for the rest of his life. So, just something to ponder. I get a lot of people who on my tours, they will comment, wow, Benjamin Franklin was so smart. Have you guys ever heard that from other people? I mean, he did so much, right? First university, first hospital, first fire department. I know I'm missing a fourth one right here. Yep,
Fire insurance.
Fire insurance, yep. First fire insurance. Of course, the odometer, the swim fins, bifocals, the lightning rod, to say the very least. Oh, and between both Franklin and Jefferson, author Walter Isaacson, who wrote the biography on Franklin, and also on Einstein, and also on Da Vinci, and also on Steve Jobs, he refers to both Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin as the avatars of the Enlightenment. Thomas Jefferson, just like Ben Franklin would have agreed, was once quoted as saying, "I cannot live without books." It's very interesting. Of course, any questions about this, just email me, you can call me, you got cards, go check out ambilife.org. There's my email, jim@ambilife, and who knows this statue in Philly, by the way? Yeah, Masonic Temple. Pretty interesting when you check out Benjamin Franklin there extending his left hand towards Washington. Just a funny little irony there. I've emailed the sculptor of this, Jim West. It's called The Bond. I love this statue, but he never replied back to me. Very, very curious as to why he was chosen left-handed, but nonetheless, it's awesome. So I guess by this point, do some questions. We good on time?
Yeah.
Good, fantastic. All right, cool.